أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، بارئ الخلائق أجمعين، باعث الأنبياء والمرسلين، ثم الصلاة والسلام على خير خلقه العبد المؤيد والرسول المسدد، حبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد
وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين وصحابته المنتجبين. صلى الله عليك يا رسول الله، صلى الله عليك يا سيدي ويا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله، يا رحمة الله الواسعة، ويا باب نجاة الأمة، ويا عبرة كل مؤمن ومؤمنة، يا مظلوم يا غريب يا شهيد كربلاء. يا ليتنا يا ليتنا كنا معكم سادتي فنفوز فوزا عظيما. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ولا تلقوا بأيديكم إلى التهلكة. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد.
Second salawat for the love of Imams Al-Hassan wal-Hussein.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
A third salawat for the love of Fatima al-Zahra with your loudest voices.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Smoking is a practice in which a substance is burned and the resulting smoke is breathed in to be inhaled. Most commonly, the substance is dried tobacco leaves rolled into rice paper into a small round cylinder shaped, or into a round cylinder called a cigarette. According to statistics, 1 billion people on the face of this earth practice smoking cigarettes. One of the very well-known features of smoking, and which has become quite prevalent and popular among the youth worldwide, is the usage of the hookah, or the shisha, or qaliyan, or the water pipe, whatever you'd like to call it, which contains flavored tobacco. According to a report from 2007, each year 4.9 million people worldwide die as a result of smoking. 4.9 million annually. Lung cancer and heart disease are only among the many diseases that are known to be caused or can be caused by smoking. Some countries have tried to reduce the amount of smokers among their citizens and in their countries by, number one, increasing the amount of tax on tobacco. Number 2, by banning smoking in public areas. And number 3, by putting age limits on buying cigarettes. However, many people ask, what is the Islamic view on smoking? What does Islam say about smoking cigarettes and smoking shisha or hookah? What does Islam say? It is well known that Muslim scholars have not banned smoking and have allowed it through the past 2 centuries, where the topic of smoking has been raised. Scholars have not banned smoking. Instead, they have legalized it and allowed it. Some scholars themselves smoke. The question is, why is there not a ban on smoking? Why have scholars not issued a fatwa forbidding people from smoking? Especially since today's scientific reports are saying that smoking is extremely harmful to a person's health. Why aren't our scholars being up to date with this scientific research? If 200 years ago scholars were saying that smoking is halal, that is understood because scientific research was not as advanced and the scientific data that we have today did not exist 200 years ago. But today, when a scholar says that smoking is allowed, he's basically ignoring the scientific research and all the statistics that exist regarding the dangers of smoking. How can we accept this? This is a question that is posed by some. Some even go farther to say, to test the credibility of some scholars and say that scholars do not put a ban on smoking because some of them smoke themselves. Because there's a great deal of scholars in Najaf and in Qom that smoke themselves. Thus, out of self-interest, they do not put a ban on smoking. Tonight, my dear friends, we'd like to know what is the Islamic view of smoking based on the current research, based on the scientific research and on the data and statistics that is being produced today, not 200 years ago. And based on the proof and evidence that we have from the Quran and the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa and the Ahlul Bayt, we'd like to find out if Islam allows smoking or not. Of course, before reaching a conclusion on the Islamic view of smoking, first we'd like to take a brief look at the history of smoking. We'd like to take a brief look on the medical reports and statistics on the harm of smoking. And number 3, on the psychology of smoking. Why do smokers smoke? What makes them smoke in the first place? And then we'll reach a conclusion and see what does Islam say about smoking. But first, send a loud salawat.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Historians say that the history of smoking dates back not 100 years ago, not 200 years ago, not even 500 years ago. But rather the history of smoking dates back to 5000 BC. 5000 BC, during the shamanistic era. Many ancient civilizations, historians say, such as the Babylonians in Iraq, Indians, Chinese, they burnt incense as part of a religious ritual. In their religious gatherings, it was something very normal to burn incense, and that would be part of the religious custom. Smoking tobacco was used in some civilizations to achieve a trance, a spiritual sort of state, with the help of smoking tobacco. And they felt that this was a way of coming into contact with the spiritual world. This was in the BC era. However, the main period where we saw a real breakthrough for smoking came into the mid-17th century, or the early 17th century. In 1612, in Jamestown, Virginia, in the United States of America, a man by the name of John Rothel was the first settler to successfully raise tobacco as a cash crop. Meaning, in Jamestown, Virginia, this man started raising tobacco as a form of living. He would raise tobacco and then he would sell it for people to manufacture and to develop tobacco as a means of smoking. The demand quickly grew, and tobacco began to be raised all across the eastern part of the United States of America. When people saw that this became a successful means of living and there was a demand on tobacco, settlers started moving west. From east of America, they started moving west with one motive, and that was to raise tobacco. They started moving to the western states and all the way to California. Of course, when they moved to California, there was the gold rush because they found gold in California. But before other states, before they reached California, their main motive was to raise tobacco and to make money. In the United States of America, they started importing slaves from Africa, mainly to help them raise and plant tobacco. This is in America. As for Europe, a Frenchman named John Nicket, and of course the name Nicket is not too, it's quite familiar because the word nicotine comes from this man. John Nicket introduced tobacco to France for the very first time in 1560. From France, tobacco was spread to England. In 1556, the first Englishman was seen smoking. Around 1600, French merchants introduced tobacco to the Senegal and Gambia. By 1650s, tobacco was popular throughout Africa. By 1650, tobacco had spread all across America and all across Europe, all across Africa. Of course, tobacco also witnessed resistance. Some people tried to put a ban on tobacco. It wasn't welcomed easily. For example, Sultan Murad IV of Turkey, the Uthmani, the Ottoman Sultan, Sultan Murad IV, in 1623 put a ban on smoking in Islamic areas and said Muslims will not smoke in our areas. In Iran, Shah Abbas I, Shah Abbas al-Safawi, the first, put a ban on smoking, and he did not allow the people of Iran to smoke. The Chinese Emperor Chongzhen banned smoking in China. In 1634, the Patriarch of Moscow in Russia forbade the sale of tobacco. In 1590, Pope Urban VII condemned smoking and banned smoking. However, regardless of all these bans and all of this resistance, the smoking of tobacco took its way all across the world, in all civilizations, and every single nationality, race, and religion. People of all religions began practicing the smoking of tobacco. In fact, it even became part of the culture of every country and every nation. It became ingrained in their culture. And the selling of tobacco became a major part of the market. It was something very well known to be a seller of tobacco back then. In fact, it became a crucial part of the economy. There was absolutely no way of stopping the sale of tobacco. No matter what the emperors, any scholar, any pope, whatever they could do, they couldn't stop the selling of tobacco. Why? Because there was a demand. People immediately became addicted to smoking tobacco, and it created a demand. And whenever there's a demand, there's a what? There's a supply. This is the law of economics. Whenever there's a demand, there's a supply. And it continued. And this shows us, my dear friends, that people were willing to sell tobacco at the cost of people's lives and at the cost of people's health. This shows you how greedy human beings are. They know that this is a substance that can destroy people's lives and can destroy people's health, but they continue to sell. They continue to make their own wealth at the cost of people's health. You see? They were making their wealth at the cost of people's health. And this is part of human nature. This is the greed in human nature. People are willing to make money at the cost of other people's health and lives. Don't we see today in some countries drug dealers who sell drugs to little children? This is greed. Don't we see some countries that sell mass destruction to other countries? Isn't this greed? You make wealth by selling weapons, you live off of other people dying and being killed. This is human nature. وَإِنَّهُ لِحُبِّ الْخَيْرِ لَشَدِيدٌ. A human being loves money, loves wealth, and he's willing to make wealth even at the cost of people's lives and health. Thus, there were many attempts to ban the sale of tobacco, but they all failed. However, I'd like to mention one incident. There was one person that was successful in banning the sale and the usage of tobacco for a certain period, and that person was a Shi'i scholar, a Shi'i mujtahid, by the name of Al-Mirza Al-Sayyid Muhammad Hassan Al-Shirazi. This scholar was living in Samarra, in Iraq, the home of the two Imams, Imam Al-Hadi and Imam Al-Hassan Al-Askari. In Iran, at the time, there was a political crisis. The Shah of Iran, by the name of Nasruddin Shah, very well known Shah at the time, from the Qajar dynasty, had given a concession to a British merchant and had allowed him to have a monopoly over the sale of tobacco, the manufacturing of tobacco, the developing of tobacco. Thus, this British merchant was making a whole lot of money from whom? From the Muslims. And of course, this was part of the concession. There were a lot of other concessions. Nasruddin Shah allowed the British to take over their roads, the roads in Iran, roads, construction, homes, basically having a monopoly over the Iranian economy. This created a major crisis. And the issue was taken to a marja', to a religious scholar, sitting not in Iran, but in Iraq, in Samarra. And Mirza Shirazi realized that the economy in Iran is about to collapse, and the people of Iran were at a disadvantage. Thus he issued a fatwa banning the usage of tobacco. This was a time, keep in mind, this was a time in which people were smoking in Iraq, in Iran, people in Tehran, people everywhere were smoking. It was customary, it was part of everyday life for people to smoke. Nasruddin Shah himself was a smoker. His wife was a smoker. The people in his palace would smoke. Al-Mirza Shirazi wrote one sentence. This shows you the power of the maraja. This shows you the power that our scholars hold. He wrote one sentence. And what's interesting is that this sentence was half Arabic, half Farsi. It wasn't all Arabic, and it wasn't all Farsi. It was half Arabic, half Farsi. But in Arabic, it was translated as such: استعمال التنباك والتتن بأي نحو كان بحكم محاربة إمام الزمان. Mirza Shirazi wrote that he who uses tobacco in any way, whether it's cigarettes or pipes or qalyan, water pipes, the usage of tobacco is equivalent of fighting the Imam of our time, Imam Sahib al-Zaman. Very powerful statement. From that day, the people of not only Iran, it was pertaining to the Iranian economy, but even people in Iraq stopped using tobacco. Have you seen such a thing? It had nothing to do with the economy of Iraq, it had to do with the economy of Iran. But people, the Shia worldwide, stopped using tobacco. To the point they say that one day Nasruddin Shah wanted a water pipe. He would smoke water pipe, he would smoke qalyan. He asked his servants to make him a water pipe, they refused. They refused. The harem, the women in his palace, they all stopped smoking. He asked why? They told him because Mirza Shirazi has issued a fatwa against tobacco. Because of this tobacco, Nasruddin Shah was pressured to retrieve that concession and take away the monopoly from the British. The British who had a monopoly, he ended this monopoly. All because of one man, a Shi'i marja. This shows that our scholars, they have power. Didn't we just see about 2 months ago, 3 months ago in Iraq, when Sayyid Sistani issued a fatwa on jihad? 3 million volunteers, they volunteered to fight against ISIS. And today, those who are working and achieving and defeating ISIS is not the official army in Iraq, it's these volunteers who obeyed their marja. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Now, as for the health risks of smoking, after nearly a century of research, for the past century, research has been done on smoking and on the harms of cigarettes, and researchers have found that smoking can cause cancer in the following places. Number one, the head, the neck, the lungs. It can cause leukemia, stomach cancer, in the kidneys, in the pancreas, in the bladder, and in the cervix. Among the illnesses and the chronic diseases that can be caused, and I know that smokers don't want to hear this, but I'm sorry, you have to hear this. Among the chronic diseases and illnesses that are caused, that can be caused, according to researchers. Of course, no one can say that smoking definitely causes these things. But no, they saw that there's a relationship between smokers and these illnesses and diseases. What are they? Stroke, blindness, gum infection, aortic rupture, heart disease, pneumonia, hardening of the arteries. Should I stop or should I continue? No, of course I'll continue. Chronic lung disease, asthma, reduced fertility, hip fracture, birth defects for pregnant women who smoke. These are only some of the illnesses and diseases that have been discovered by researchers that can be caused by smoking. Smoking is recognized as one of the leading causes of preventable deaths globally. What do I mean by preventable deaths? It means a death that could have been prevented. A death that could have been prevented. Smoking is one of the leading causes of preventable deaths. In the United States of America, 500,000 deaths per year due to smoking. Only in the United States of America. 1/3 of China's male population will have shortened lifespans due to smoking. Listen to this. Male smokers lose an average of 13.2 years of life due to smoking. Of course, for lifelong smokers, Men who remain smoking their entire life, according to statistics and research, will lose 13.2 years of their life. For females, they will lose 14.5 years. And so why do women lose more years? I don't know. But women lose 1 more year more than men. Half of all lifelong smokers die earlier than a non-smoker. Half of them. The risk of dying from lung cancer before the age of 85 is 22.1% for males and 11.9% for females. This is all the harms that smoking causes for the smoker himself, let alone the harms of smoking for whom? For others. The secondhand smoking. A person's wife, the smoker's wife, or the smoker's husband. Their children, their friends, their co-workers. The harms that we just mentioned are only the harms towards the smoker himself, let alone secondhand smoking, and the effect that it has on those that are associated with the smoker. The top consumers of tobacco smoke, which country do you think is the country that has the biggest consumers of smoking? First, it's Russia, then Indonesia, then Ukraine, then Greece, then Jordan, then China. In this order, the greatest consumers of cigarettes. Greece by itself, in 2007, a report came out that an average person in Greece smokes 3,000 cigarettes per year. 3,000 cigarettes per year only in Greece. Now, in the United States of America, from the year 1965 to the year 2006, the rates of smoking have declined. The rates of smoking have declined. From 42% of Americans used to smoke in 1965, but in 2006, only 20% of Americans smoke. This is a good sign that the amount of smokers in the United States have decreased. Of course, this is thanks due to several factors. Number one, the high taxes. The government has high taxes on tobacco. Number two, they started banning smoking in public areas. Number three, age limits. If you are not 21 years of age and you can't prove it, then you can't buy cigarettes. And number four, there are campaigns against cigarettes. I don't know if this exists in Canada, but in the United States of America and in Europe, on every pack of cigarettes, there's a picture of lungs that are deteriorating, or the heart that is clogged with clogged arteries. Or on the pack of cigarettes, it says smoking kills. This has an effect. This has an effect on a smoker when he wants to go and buy, and he reads that. It has an effect. It will reduce the amount of cigarettes. However, that was the good news. The bad news is, while the amount of smokers has been declining in the United States of America, it has been increasing in the Middle East. Places like Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Jordan, Lebanon, Syria. Smokers have increased in such areas. Well, surely because there's no bans, there's no taxes on tobacco. People can smoke in public areas, in schools, and airports. And there's no age limits. In the Middle East, a six-year-old child can go and buy cigarettes and there's no ban. And the store owner will sell cigarettes to a 6-year-old or a 7-year-old. There's no bans. The only country that I've seen that has bans and strict bans on cigarettes is Saudi Arabia. And we have to give credit when it's due. وَلَا تَبْخَسُوا النَّاسَ أَشْيَاءَهُمْ. They deserve this credit. Saudi Arabia is the only country in the Middle East that has strict bans on cigarettes. Otherwise, wherever you go in the Middle East, there's no bans on cigarettes. صلى على محمد وعلى محمد. popular feature of smoking, of tobacco smoking, is hookahs, or shishas, or water pipes, or qilyan, or every culture, every country has a name for it. But they all speak of the same object, the water pipe, which has water, it filters out the smoke, which is actually vaporized, flavored tobacco. The history of the qilyan, or water pipe, dates back to the Safawi dynasty. It was during the time of Shah Abbas II, in which the qilyan was produced in Iran and Persia. Iranians were the founders of the qilyan. And it was in that country in which it was established, and it became popular, and it spread, even though there were bans. Even though Shah Abbas I put a ban on tobacco, on the usage of tobacco, yet it became popular, it became part of the culture, it became extremely famous and popular, it became a national addiction. And from Iran, it spread to the neighboring countries. It went to Lebanon, it went to Syria, it went to Egypt, and when it reached other countries, they enhanced it, they built it better, they made it even nicer, until it became a prominent feature of Middle Eastern culture. Today, when you go to the Middle East, you will find in every city, there's at least several shisha cafes and hookah cafes. Many. And you will see that the youth, these shisha cafes are packed with youth, with young men and women that go, some on a nightly basis, that go and smoke shisha at these shisha cafes. And it became social smoking at all get-togethers, even at family gatherings. Several families get together at people's homes. You will find that the qilyan is very present. It's there. When youth get together at homes, you will find that the qilyan and the hookahs and shishas are very present. Even during the nights of Ramadan, in which the nights of Ramadan are dedicated for worship, for supplication, for reciting dua, for reciting Quran, you will find that youth, instead of attending at the Islamic centers and masajid, you will find them at shisha cafes smoking. Now, what are the cons of shisha smoking? Something that has become extremely popular, not just in the Middle East, but all over America, all over Europe, all over Canada. What are the problems? What are the cons? Number one, they're very expensive. At some shisha cafes, one shisha could be $20, $30. In some places, they are $40. This is one. Two, at most of these shisha cafes, there's mixed gatherings between young men and young women. In the center, at their mosques, men and women are separated. But when they go to shisha cafes and there's no parental supervision, young men and women have the leisure of mixing, chatting, joking, exchanging numbers, and God knows what else happens. Of course, there's laughter, there's jokes, there's music. There's always music being played at such places. In some of these places, there's dancing. Thus, I can safely say that at many shisha cafes, shaitan is present. It's a place where shaitan enjoys being at and has a prominent role and feature in. Some of these young men and young women who go to these shisha cafes almost on a daily basis or nightly basis, and they spend at least $20 or $30 if they go on a nightly basis, and they spend a minimum of $20. How much is that per week? Let's say per week it's at least $100. How much is that per month? That's $400 per month. How much is that per year? That's approximately $4,800 per year. Yet it's these same youth, when you ask them, why don't you get married? They say, we can't afford marriage. We don't have the money. They have the money to go to a shisha cafe every night and order a cafe order a shisha along with coffee or tea, whatever it is that they order. They have the money for that, but when you tell them, why don't you get married? They say we can't afford it. Weddings are very costly. The mahar, the dowry, is very costly. Women today have lots of demands. We can't afford weddings. Do you see the problem here? They have the money to go to shisha cafes and spend so much money on that, but they don't have money for marriage. There are some married men who have wives and have children, yet they have become addicted to smoking shisha and go to a shisha cafe almost on a nightly basis. They leave their wives, their children at night, at 11 or 12 at night, and they leave to go and smoke with their friends. This is not a healthy habit. If it's once a week, once a month, that's fine. But when it becomes a habit, a nightly habit, a daily habit, this is not healthy. In the United States of America, from the year 2000 to the year 2004, 200 hookah cafes were opened, mostly near college campuses and university campuses. In 2011, a study was conducted. A study showed that 40.3% of college students in the United States of America have smoked hookah. 40%. Now, of course, hookahs also have a health hazard, not just smoking cigarettes. A lot of youth, they frown upon smoking cigarettes, and they say that smoking cigarettes is not healthy. But they give a blind eye to smoking shisha and to smoking hookahs. Hookahs also have a health hazard. The average hookah session, shisha session, lasts about 40 minutes, approximately. There are some experts, they would know better. Approximately 40 minutes. These 40 minutes, they consist of anywhere from 50 to 200 inhalations of smoke. That is about 0.15 to 0.5 liters of smoke being inhaled within these 40 minutes. In 1 hour session of shisha smoking, users consume 100 to 200 times the volume of smoking a cigarette. Thus, a person who smokes shisha or qalyan or water pipe for 1 hour is actually smoking what is equivalent to anywhere from 100 to 200 what? Cigarettes. Yet for shisha smokers, you ask them, would you like to smoke a cigarette? They say, no, that's not healthy. Is shisha smoking healthy? Why don't we get our facts straight? Salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Now, why do smokers smoke? What is the psychology behind it? First of all, according to statistics, that most smokers, when they started smoking, they were extremely young. In fact, they were in their teenage years, probably 16, 17, 18. Most smokers, they started around this age. You rarely find a smoker that begins smoking at the age of 40, or at the age of 50, or at the age of 60. 16, yes, but not 60. Why is this? Why do smokers start at a young age? What is it that appeals young people to smoking? Number one, there's an element of rebellion. Smoking is seen as rebellious. And young people, they like to be rebellious. They enjoy being rebellious. They rebel against the adult world. That is why you see young people, some young people, of course, not all, they go get those weird hairstyles, and they go get the tattoos, and they dress differently. Why? It's a part of rebellion, being rebellious. Smoking cigarettes, it has that element in it, that rebellious element in it. That's one. Number two, there's the element of risk-taking. Young people like taking risks. That's why you see that young people, they enjoy riding roller coasters because it has a risk-taking element. It's risky, it's dangerous. They like to go bungee jumping, skydiving. Some youth like snakes. Out of all of the animals that God created, you see some youth, they like snakes. Why? Because it has a risk-taking element, because snakes are dangerous. Thus, they want to show off. They want to say, see, I'm cool. I don't mind holding a snake. I don't mind having a snake at home. It has a risk-taking element. Car racing. Youth like to race in cars. Why? Because there's taking risks. Smoking, because it could be hazardous to one's health, it's taking risks. That's why some youth are appealed to smoking. 3, for some youth, smoking is seen as the first step out of childhood and into adulthood. They think that by smoking, they'll be bigger and older. They'll seem older. That's why they'll enjoy smoking. Number 4, smoking is encouraged on TV, in Hollywood, on movies, celebrities. You will find the most famous and popular actors smoke. On TV, in a lot of movies, you'll find that the actor is smoking. He's acting cool. This has an effect. This has a subconscious effect on the youth that are watching the movie. This gives them a message that it's cool to smoke, that it's nice to smoke, that it's not a taboo, there's nothing wrong with it. It gives a hidden message. And number 5, there's peer pressure. When your friend at work or at school smokes, there's a big chance that you'll become a smoker. Why? Because this is your friend. The friend that spends at least 4 hours, 5 hours with you. If he smokes, there's a big chance that you will smoke as well. You will be pressured to smoke. If you refuse to smoke, you will be called a chicken, a coward, and eventually you'll give in and you'll start smoking. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Now this is why smokers begin at a young age. But why do smokers continue fasting? Why do they continue smoking, not fasting? That was our topic last night. I mixed between the topics. Why do adults continue smoking? What is it? What's the psychology behind it? When you ask most smokers, they say that it relieves our stress. We have our issues, we have problems at home, at work, the economy's not so good, I have a lot of bills to pay, my children stress me out, my studies, and they'll give you a list of issues that cause them stress. They say that smoking reduces stress. It helps cope with life's problems. It helps us deal with life's problems. However, according to studies and statistics, that the stress level in adult smokers is higher than non-smokers. Smokers have a higher level of stress than non-smokers. Even though they smoke, even though they're supposed to have a lower level of stress, they have a higher level of stress. In fact, some studies mention that nicotine dependency increases stress. When you are dependent on nicotine, this increases stress with you. That is why you see smokers, if they can't smoke, for example, when they're fasting. Have you seen smokers when they're fasting? They're very stressed out because they haven't smoked for several hours. This increases the level of stress with them. They think that it's decreasing it while it's increasing. Yes, the only time when a smoker reduces his stress is when he's smoking at that moment. But in between cigarettes, no. The level of stress increases. According to some psychologists, that smokers are more social than non-smokers. They are impulsive, meaning they act sometimes without thinking, they act on impulse. They are risk takers and excitement seekers. Now, we come to the very important question that we started with. What does Islam say about smoking? First of all, some might say, well, what does Islam have to say about smoking? Smoking did not exist at the time of Rasulullah, nor at the time of our Imams. None of the Sahaba or the companions of the Prophet and the Imams smoked. So how can you tell me what Islam says about smoking? The Prophet didn't smoke, nor did the Imams, nor did it exist at their time. So how can Islam tell us the ruling about smoking? No, you see, Islam has given us general laws and general principles. We believe that the door of ijtihad is open in Islam. Islam has given us general laws that we can derive laws from, has given us general principles that we can derive laws from. We believe that in Islam, everything is halal and allowed by default. Everything is allowed unless proven to be haram. We believe in this. We believe, Sunnis believe in this. Everyone accepts this, that everything in Islam is allowed until proven that it's haram. The Quran says, قُلْ مَنْ حَرَّمَ زِينَةَ اللَّهِ الَّتِي أَخْرَجَ لِعِبَادِهِ وَطَيِّبَاتٍ مِنَ الرِّزْقِ. Who has forbidden the things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created? كُلُّ شَيْءٍ لَكَ حَلَالٍ حَتَّى تَعْرِفَ أَنَّهُ حَرَامٍ. This is a hadith by one of the Imams, that everything is halal unless proven haram. Thus, by default, everything is halal. Those who say that smoking is haram, they have to provide their evidence. We don't need to provide evidence to say that it's halal. You see? Everything by default is halal. Some say that the Quran says, وَلَا تَلْقُوا بِأَيْدِيكُمْ إِلَى التَّهْلُكَةِ. Do not expose, the Quran says, do not expose yourself to murder, to death. And smoking is a form of exposing oneself to death. When you smoke, you're exposing yourself to death, as we saw the reports that smoking causes death. However, when we examine the verse, وَلَا تَلْقُوا بِأَيْدِيكُمْ إِلَى التَّهْلُكَةِ, it means don't kill yourself. Basically, it's trying to say don't commit suicide. Don't kill yourself. Smoking is not a form of suicide. Smoking is not seen as a form of killing oneself. There's 1 billion smokers on the face of this planet. If you go and ask them, are you killing yourself? They'll say no. Are you committing suicide? Of course not. It's not logical for 1 billion people on the face of this planet to try to kill themselves and to try to commit suicide. Thus, smoking is not a form of committing suicide or killing oneself. Yes, it can lead to killing. It can lead to death, but not immediately. After 30 years, 40 years, maybe 50 years, it can lead to a person's death. It can hasten and quicken a person's death, but it won't kill right away. Thus, it is not very clear to say that this verse, وَلَا تَلْقُوا بِأَيْدِيكُمْ إِلَى التَّهْلُكَةِ, and do not kill yourself, can be used here to say that smoking is haram. Even though smoking can lead to death 50 years from now, but it doesn't kill right at the moment. And the verse is addressing things that kill right at the moment. وَلَا تَلْقُوا بِأَيْدِيكُمْ إِلَى التَّهْلُكَةِ, don't kill yourself. Meaning don't kill yourself now. Right there. Momentarily. Thus, scholars, they say that this verse is not very applicable when it comes to smoking. Especially for those who smoke lightly. Yes, there are some that smoke heavily, and this could lead to a rush death. This quickens their death. However, those that smoke lightly, it is not for 100% sure that this will lead to their death. In fact, at the same time that there's research that shows that smoking can kill, there are many that smoked perhaps all their life but lived an average life. They lived up to the age of 80 or 90. Thus, for light smokers, It's not necessarily exposing oneself to death, as some scholars have argued. Another evidence that has been used to say that smoking should be banned is la dharab wa la dharar, and no harming of each other in Islam. They say, see, Islam says no harm in Islam, and smoking is harmful. So shouldn't smoking be banned? Scholars say that no. No harm in Islam is not saying do not harm yourself. It is saying that there are no harmful laws in Islam. For example, if you have to perform wudu on an extremely cold day with very cold water, and this wudu will be very harmful for you, Islam says no, you don't need to perform wudu. You can perform tayammum because there is no harm in Islam. Fasting, if it's very harmful for you, if it will cause you sickness or illness, Islam says you don't need to fast. If you are dying from thirst and the only thing that's available is alcohol, Islam says drink alcohol in order to live, because there is no harm in Islam. Thus, la dharar is trying to say there are no harmful laws in Islam. Not that you cannot harm yourself. There's a difference. Others have said, to point out that smoking should be banned, they say that this is rational practice. Rational and reasonable people do not harm themselves. Do not harm themselves. A reasonable, rational person does not harm himself. Thus, and smoking is harmful, thus it should be banned. However, we ask that reasonable people, rational people, they don't harm themselves. Which kind of harm? Big harm, such as taking away their lives, or cutting off a limb, or amputating a limb or organ, yes. This is a big harm. Reasonable people do not expose themselves to big harm. However, if it's a minor harm or a regular harm, yes, reasonable people expose themselves to harm every day. They eat greasy food that can cause diabetes, or high blood pressure, or cholesterol, fizzy drinks, even Wi-Fi can, some statistics say that it could cause cancer. Microwaved food, it could cause cancer. Yeah, we see reasonable people, rational people, they expose themselves to such things. Thus, this is not very clear. Others have stated that smoking is a form of wasting. It's wasting your money. And the Quran says, وَلَا تُبَذِّرْ تَبْذِيرًا إِنَّ الْمُبَذِّرِينَ كَانُوا مِنْ إِخْوَانِ الشَّيَاطِينَ. Do not waste your money. According to some statistics, that in the United States of America, $96.7 billion are spent on public and private health care. And that a male smoker that smokes 1 pack of cigarettes a day can expect an average increase of $19,000 in medical expenses over the course of his lifetime. $19,000 a smoker will spend on his medical expenses more than a non-smoker. So isn't this wasting? This is not very clear as well. Why? Because when you ask a smoker, when he's buying cigarettes, is he wasting his money or not? What will he say? He'll say, I'm not wasting. Thus, it depends on who you ask. From the perspective of a non-smoker, yes, smoking is wasting. But from the perspective of a smoker, he's not wasting his money. He's benefiting. He's spending it on something that benefits him. In fact, a lot of smokers, they say as a joke, when you tell them don't harm your lungs, smoking harms your lungs, as a joke, they say, well, why do I have lungs in the first place? God gave me lungs so that I can smoke. I don't even want my lungs if I can't smoke. Of course, it depends on who you ask, whose perspective you take, the smoker or the non-smoker. Thus, the conclusion that we reach is that to issue a ban on smoking, we would require more evidence. We would require more evidence and more proof. Yes, if a person believes that smoking is very dangerous to his health, very harmful to his health, then this is another issue. And it depends on the amount that he smokes as well. This is also something very relative. If a person is an excessive smoker and is exposing himself to harm, then yes, this is a sin. This is a sin. But if a person is a light smoker, it is not very harmful for him, then some scholars might say that this is not detrimental to a person's health. But everyone would agree that smoking should be stopped. Everyone agrees, whether you're a smoker or a non-smoker, all agree that it is best to stop smoking, to avoid smoking, and to quit smoking. And one of the best times to stop smoking is Ramadan. Because in Ramadan you abstain from eating, drinking, and smoking for half of the day, especially for the brothers and sisters that live in Canada and Europe who fast for 22 or 21 hours. They develop a strong sense of will, thus let them use that will to stop smoking. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. You see, my dear friends, Islam is a beautiful religion. Islam came to fix people's problems. Islam has an answer for every problem, for every crisis, for every situation. All aspect of life, whether it's eating or drinking or smoking or marrying or walking or exercising, Islam has an answer and an opinion. And this religion required a translator, an explainer, someone to come and explain. And those who were most qualified to explain and translate were the Ahlul Bayt, were the Imams. Now, who is more logical to come to power? The Ahlul Bayt who can explain this religion, or a person like Yazid? Of course, it's common sense that the household of Rasulullah are the most qualified to explain this religion and to lead this religion. That is why Imam Hussein alayhi salam, he stated, Inna ahlu bayt al-nubuwa wa mawda' al-rasala bina fatah Allah wa bina yakhtim wa yazid rajulun fasiqun fajir wa mithli la yubayi'u mithla. We are the household of the Prophet. The Quran was revealed in our house. Allah began with us and ended with us. And as for Yazid, Yazid is a corrupt man, a person, an alcoholic. Someone like me will never give allegiance to someone like Yazid. Tonight, I'd like to take you to Sham within the next 2 minutes remaining. Tonight, we commemorate the daughter of Imam Hussein, as-Sayyida Ruqayya. The household of Imam Hussein alayhi salam was put in a tent next to the palace of Yazid. Ruqayya, a 3-year-old daughter of Imam Hussein, would continuously ask about her father, Imam Hussein. She would continuously ask. Her aunt Zainab would tell her, your father is on a journey. He's traveling. One night Ruqayya fell asleep and she saw her father in her dream. She woke up thinking that her father is next to her. She saw that her father's not there. She went to her aunt Zainab. My aunt Zainab, where is my father? She told him he's traveling. She said, no, he's not traveling. Just moments ago he was with me. She began to cry and all of the women in the tent began crying. The noise reached Yazid. He was drunk in his palace. He said, what is this noise? They told him one of the daughters of Hussein saw her father in her dream. She woke up and she wants her father. He said, La ba's, ahmilu alayha ra'sa abiha. He said, take the head of her father to her. Perhaps he will console her. They brought the head of the father in a dish and they put it in front of Sayyida Ruqayya. Ruqayya said, I don't wish to eat. I didn't ask for food. I am not hungry. I asked to see my father. They told her, what you wish for is in this dish. She raised the dish and she saw the head of أبا عبد الله الحسين أبا من الذي خضب الشيب العفيف؟ من الذي أيتمني على صغر سني؟ My dear father who cut your head, my dear father who stained your beard with your blood, my dear father who made me an orphan at this age. Sayyidah Ruqayya held the head and she kept on weeping and crying until Imam Zayn al-Abidin said, Amma Zaynab, lift the child from the head. When they lifted the child, they saw that Ruqayya had passed away. يا أنا تحيرت والله بيتامك. السلام على الرأس الشريف، السلام على الجسم السليم، السلام على الشيب المخضب بالدماء. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. نسألك اللهم وندعوك باسمك العظيم الأعظم الأعز الأجل الأكرم يا الله. اللهم لا تدع لنا ذنبا إلا غفرته، ولا هما إلا فرجته، ولا عيبا إلا سترته، ولا خوفا إلا آمنته، ولا رزقا إلا بسطته، ولا شملا إلا جمعته، ولا مرضا إلا شفيته، ولا غائبا إلا حفظته وأدنيته، ولا حاجة من حوائج الدنيا والآخرة لك فيها رضا ولنا فيها صلاح إلا قضيتها ويسرتها يا أرحم الراحمين. ولا أرواح المؤمنين والمؤمنات نقرأ سورة الفاتحة مع الصلوات.